My dear brothers and sisters, when we open the Holy Qur'an, we find descriptions of Hoor al Ayn, beings of purity, beauty, and light, created as a reward for the righteous. But over centuries, the image of the Hoor has been distorted, reduced to worldly imagination rather than understood through divine wisdom. To understand the reality, we must turn to the al-Bayt, the family of the Prophet, for they are the speaking Quran, the guides who interpret revelation with truth and purity. The first reality to recognize is that the Hoor al Ayn are not symbols of lust, they are reflections of purity, tranquility, and divine beauty. Imam Zahra al-Sadiq, explained that Allah created the Hoor not from dust or clay but from near a divine light. Their existence is not bound by human limitation, nor are they created through the trials of life. They are manifestations of perfection without effort. But then, the question arises, how does this compare to the believing women of this world, the mothers, daughters, and wives who endure, who strive, who cry before Allah in the middle of the night? The concept of Hoor al Ayn has often been misunderstood and misrepresented over time. Many people have taken the descriptions found in the Quran and Hadith and interpreted them through a materialistic or worldly lens, imagining paradise as a place of physical indulgence rather than spiritual elevation. But according to the teachings of the al-Bayt, the Hoor are not symbols of lust or desire, they are manifestations of divine beauty, purity, and reward. Their existence serves as a metaphor to express the spiritual and moral purity that awaits the righteous in the hereafter. When Allah speaks of Hoor al Ayn in the Quran, He is not addressing the carnal desires of mankind but rather describing the level of sanctity, peace, and perfection that is beyond the comprehension of worldly life. The al-Bayt, teach us that every verse of the Quran has both an apparent and an inner meaning, a surface that can be seen by all and a depth that only the guided can perceive. Thus, when the Quran describes the companions of paradise as pure ones, it reflects not only a physical state of beauty but the spiritual state of cleanliness free from sin, arrogance, and impurity. Imam Zahra al-Sadiq, has said that the Hoor al Ayn were created from divine light, not from earthly substance, indicating that their nature is beyond human understanding. They are not like the creations of this world, they represent the harmony, balance, and peace that the soul yearns for in its purest form. The distortion arises when human beings, influenced by their limited material experiences, reduce divine symbolism to physical imagery. The al-Bayt, consistently reminded their followers that paradise is not a place of base pleasure but the station of divine proximity. Imam Ali, once said that the true reward for the believer is not in palaces, rivers, or gardens, but in Allah's eternal pleasure. The description of Hoor is part of this spiritual language, a way for the human mind to grasp the ungraspable, to comprehend a fraction of what Allah has prepared for the righteous. When the Quran mentions rivers of milk and honey, it is not simply promising food and drink, it is symbolizing purity, sweetness, and abundance. Likewise, the mention of the Hoor symbolizes the purity and serenity that fill the heart of the believer who has reached nearness to Allah. According to the narrations from Imam al-Sadiq, the real essence of Jannah lies not in the possessions or the companions of paradise but in the vision of Allah's mercy. A believer will not desire the material aspects once he witnesses the beauty of divine nearness. The descriptions are meant to motivate human beings to strive for righteousness, to remain steadfast in worship, and to long for that spiritual fulfillment. The al-Bayt, made it clear that the Quran speaks to all levels of understanding. For the simple-hearted, it offers tangible promises to encourage good deeds. For the seekers of truth, it offers symbols of the unseen world and reflections of divine mercy. The Hoor, therefore, are a representation of divine purity and reward, and not physical women to be desired but symbols of peace and perfection that await those who live the life of faith. Imam Zain al-Abidin, in his supplications always focused on seeking Allah's pleasure, not the rewards of paradise, saying, "O Allah, if I worship you for fear of your fire, then burn me in it, and if I worship you for the reward of paradise, then deny me of it. But if I worship you for your sake, then withhold not your everlasting beauty from me. This is the essence of understanding the concept of Hoor in the light of the al-Bayt. It is not about desire, but about devotion, not about beauty, but about purity, not about gaining, but about returning to Allah in the state of peace. The believer who understands this sees paradise not as a destination but as the fulfillment of a journey of love, sincerity, and submission to the Creator. In that journey, the Hoor are not the end, but a reflection of the divine purity that one attains when the heart is cleansed of all worldly attachments. According to the teachings of the al-Bayt, the true worth of a human being is not found in how they are created but in how they choose to live. This principle defines the difference between the Hoor al Ayn and the believing women of this world. The Hoor are beings of divine creation, formed from light, untouched by pain, trial, or sin. They are symbols of purity, created perfect. But the believing woman, who walks through the challenges of this world with faith, patience, and modesty, attains a status that surpasses the Hoor. Her perfection is earned, not given. She rises not because she was made flawless, but because she struggled against her imperfections and remained loyal to Allah through them. Imam Zahra al-Sadiq, explained that Allah's most beloved creation is the one who strives to obey Him despite hardship. The believing woman faces temptation, fear, social pressure, and sorrow, yet she holds on to her prayer, her hijab, her moral dignity, and her devotion to al-Bayt. Every moment of that struggle lifts her higher in the eyes of her Lord. Imam Ali, once said that patience in obedience is greater than patience in calamity, for obedience requires the conquering of the self. The Hoor do not possess this struggle. They were created in a state of obedience, but the believing woman chooses obedience despite having free will. This is why her reward is not only paradise but the admiration of even the angels. When Allah mentions in the Qur'an that the righteous will be joined by pure companions, the al-Bayt, interpreted as a reunion of souls purified by their deeds. The believing woman, who spent her life in worship and sincerity, becomes more radiant in the hereafter than any Hoor, for her light was earned through faith. Sayyida Fatimah al-Zahra, stands as the supreme example. Her greatness did not lie only in her lineage but in her endurance, her sacrifice, and her devotion. She was the daughter of the Prophet, yet she lived with simplicity. She gave away her food to the poor even when she herself was hungry. Her life was a reflection of selflessness and worship. The Prophet, said that on the Day of Judgment, Fatimah, will appear brighter than all the lights of paradise, and the Hoor al Ayn will gaze upon her in awe, learning from her radiance. This statement is not limited to Fatimah, alone. It extends to every believing woman who follows her example, who carries her modesty and her faith into every aspect of life. Such a woman becomes the crown of paradise, not a mere resident. Imam al-Sadiq, narrates that when a believing woman enters paradise, Allah will make her youth and beauty eternal. Her light will shine brighter than the Hoor, and her rank will be raised above theirs, for she believed without seeing, and she endured without complaint. The Hoor cannot experience sorrow or patience. They have never tasted the bitterness of life or the burden of faith. But the believing woman has felt pain and still said, Alhamdulillah. She has seen loss and still trusted Allah's plan. She has wept in prayer and still stood firm in hope. Every tear shed in His remembrance becomes a jewel for her in paradise. The al-Bayt, valued such women deeply. Imam Zayn al-Abidin, when speaking about the women of Karbala, especially Sayyida Zainab, said that their patience was the greatest act of jihad. In the ruins of Sham, when Zainab, stood firm before Yazid's throne, she embodied the highest form of faith, a faith that turns pain into power and loss into legacy. Can there be any comparison between a being created perfect and a woman who becomes perfect through struggle? The believing woman walks through a world of trials, yet her purity is chosen, her modesty is intentional, and her worship is filled with sincerity. Every act of devotion builds her soul until it shines beyond measure. In the hereafter, her beauty will not be of form but of spirit. Her face will glow with the light of contentment, and her soul will radiate the mercy of Allah. She will not stand behind the Hur will serve her, for she is of a higher creation in terms of faith. The Prophet, Sayyida, said that the women of this world who believed and were patient will be the queens of paradise, and the Hur will look upon them as one looks upon a bright star. This statement captures the true spirit of the al-Bayt's teachings. Honor is not in being created perfect, but in striving for perfection through worship. Therefore, every believing woman who remains steadfast in her religion, guards her modesty, serves her family with sincerity, and keeps her heart attached to Allah has already surpassed the Hur. Her worth is written not in the heavens but in the sacrifices she makes daily. She is the living reflection of Fatimah, S.A., and Zainab, S.A., and her true beauty lies in her patience, her prayer, and her unwavering faith. The creation of the Hoor al Ayn, as explained in the teachings of the al-Bayt, A.S., carries a deeper spiritual significance than what is often assumed. Allah did not create the Hur as a means to satisfy human desire but as a reflection of his beauty and mercy, a manifestation of purity and harmony in the divine realm. The Hur are symbols of what it means to live free from impurity and sin, created as companions of peace for those who achieved purity in their worldly life. They are not created in competition with believing women, nor are they meant to represent superiority. Rather, they represent divine artistry, a sign of the kind of serenity that fills the eternal abode of those who have purified their souls. In the Qur'an, when Allah describes the companions of paradise as pure, serene, and radiant, he is communicating to humanity that the true reward of righteousness is freedom from every impurity that burdens the heart in this world: jealousy, greed, anger, lust, and fear. The Hur are a metaphor for this perfection of soul. Imam Zahra Sadiq, A.S., teaches that every creation of Allah serves a purpose beyond its outward form. The Hur were created to manifest the light of divine purity, so that when the righteous enter paradise, they find in every corner a reflection of Allah's mercy in perfection. Just as the rivers of paradise represent divine satisfaction and the gardens represent eternal growth, the Hur symbolize the peace of the purified soul. The Prophet, Sayyida, and his al-Bayt, A.S., always guided the believers to look beyond the surface of the words in the Qur'an. When Allah speaks of gardens, palaces, and companions, he is not calling toward materialism but inspiring the heart to yearn for what lies behind these images of the tranquility that comes from nearness to the Creator. The Hur are therefore not mere beings of beauty, but signs for contemplation. Their existence tells us that every act of purity in this world, every time a believer resists sin, controls anger, guards the tongue, lowers the gaze, and remembers Allah in solitude, he creates within the soul a light that mirrors the purity of the Hur. That light is the soul's share of paradise even before death. Imam Ali, A.S., said that the truest paradise is the peace that comes from obedience to Allah, and the truest punishment is the restlessness that comes from sin. The Hur symbolize the peace earned by those who obeyed Allah purely out of love. In this way, they are not competitors to human beings but reminders of what humans can become through righteousness. When a believer perfects the heart, the soul itself begins to reflect that divine beauty that the Hur represent. For women who lived righteous lives in this world, their reward is even greater, for their purity is born of struggle, while the Hur's purity is born of creation. In one narration, Imam al-Sadiq, A.S., explained that when believing women enter paradise, they will be adorned with light and glory far surpassing the Hur, for Allah will honor them with what he withheld from the rest of creation, the beauty that results from patience, faith, and sacrifice. The purpose behind the creation of the Hur is not to create comparison or jealousy but to express Allah's infinite generosity. They are a part of the language of the unseen, a way for the limited human mind to comprehend the reward of purity. In a world driven by material desires, people often misunderstand this, assuming the Hur are created merely for pleasure. But the al-Bayt, A.S., clarified that such thinking is a sign of spiritual immaturity. The mature believer sees beyond the physical and recognizes the Hur as reflections of divine order and peace. Imam Zain al-Abidin, A.S. in his supplications, often described paradise as a place where every creation exists in perfect harmony, where no being is superior except by closeness to Allah. In that world, the Hoor are not objects of possession but companions of peace. Their purpose is to serve as manifestations of the light of Allah's mercy. When Allah rewards the righteous with their company, it is not because of physical beauty but because they symbolize the state of purity the believer achieved through struggle. Every person in paradise will have companions who reflect their inner purity, meaning that the form and beauty of the Hoor reflect the believer's spiritual rank. This understanding transforms the concept entirely. It becomes a spiritual allegory, not a material one. The teachings of the al-Bayt, A.S. elevate the believer's understanding from the surface of desire to the depth of divine meaning. Allah created the Hoor to teach humanity that purity has a form, that beauty has a moral essence, and that peace is not found in possession but in nearness to the Creator. Thus, their creation serves as a reminder that what awaits the righteous is beyond imagination, a reward that cannot be measured by worldly standards. The believing woman, therefore, should never compare herself to the Hoor, for the Hoor are creations of paradise, but she is the builder of it through her patience, faith, and love of Allah. The man should not look toward them with worldly expectation but should strive to become among those who are worthy of witnessing such divine beauty. The purpose of the Hoor is to remind the believer that every act of purity in this life is rewarded with divine beauty in the next, and that Allah's generosity extends far beyond what human language can describe. The true essence of paradise, as taught by the al-Bayt, A.S., is not found in physical pleasures, luxurious gardens, or even companionship, but in the nearness to Allah and the peace that comes from His eternal pleasure. The descriptions of paradise in the Qur'an are rivers flowing beneath, fruits without end, pure companions are not literal depictions for worldly enjoyment but symbolic representations of the tranquility of the soul and the satisfaction of the heart when it finally reaches its Creator. Imam Ali, A.S., said, "Even if I were granted all of paradise, but Allah's pleasure was absent, it would not satisfy me. And if Allah were pleased with me, then I need nothing else." This statement captures the spiritual reality of paradise and the teachings of the al-Bayt, A.S. It is not a place, but the state of divine acceptance. The believer's greatest reward is not what he receives but who he becomes in that nearness. Every trial in this world, every act of patience, every moment of worship, and every tear shed in sincerity becomes a step toward that divine union. The al-Bayt, A.S., taught that the human heart was created with an eternal longing, a longing that no worldly possession can fulfill. That longing is the desire for Allah's pleasure. The Hoor, the palaces, the gardens, are merely reflections of that satisfaction. They are signs, not ends. Imam Zahra al-Sadiq, A.S., explained that when a believer enters paradise, his greatest joy will not be the external blessings, but the inner realization that Allah is pleased with him. The soul will finally rest, for it has returned to its source. Allah describes this in the Qur'an, "O soul at peace, return to your Lord, pleased and pleasing. Enter among my servants, enter my paradise." Here, my paradise is not a garden but the state of being enveloped in Allah's mercy. The al-Bayt, A.S., teach that every description of paradise has both an outer and an inner meaning. The outer description gives hope to the simple-hearted, while the inner meaning elevates the seeker toward understanding the true goal of the vision of Allah's mercy. The Prophet, Sayyida, once said that there is a moment in paradise when the veils will be lifted and the believers will behold the beauty of Allah, and that moment will make them forget every other reward. This is the meeting of the soul with its Creator, the culmination of every prayer, every act of faith, and every sigh of patience. For the believers who live their lives attached to the remembrance of Allah, this will be the ultimate fulfillment. The al-Bayt, A.S., also remind us that not everyone's paradise will be the same. Each soul will experience it according to its level of faith, purity, and nearness. For some, paradise will be gardens and company. For others, it will be knowledge and reflection. But for the highest of souls, it will be nothing but Allah's presence. Imam Zain al-Abidin, A.S., prayed, "O Allah, make my joy in your remembrance, my comfort in nearness to you, and my satisfaction in meeting you. His words reveal that the true Jannah begins even in this world, when the heart finds peace through faith. The believer who trains the heart to love Allah more than the world already tastes a portion of paradise before death. When such a person enters the hereafter, paradise merely continues that peace eternally. This understanding also changes how we view the Hoor and the material rewards of Jannah. They are no longer the focus but signs of Allah's mercy. The true believer is not motivated by what he will receive, but by whom he will meet. In the supplications of Imam Ali, A.S., and Imam al-Sajjad, A.S., the tone is always one of love, not transaction. They never asked for paradise as a possession, but for the opportunity to dwell near the divine presence. This love transforms the soul, purifying it from selfish desire and making it capable of eternal joy. The al-Bayt, A.S., teach that Allah's pleasure is the highest station a soul can attain, and it surpasses all other rewards. When the Qur'an says, "And the greatest bliss is Allah's pleasure upon them," it reminds us that all other blessings pale in comparison. The believer who seeks Allah's pleasure in every action finds his paradise in every breath. Such a person does not wait for Jannah, he carries it within his heart. The soul that has found peace and obedience to Allah will find that same peace multiplied infinitely in the hereafter. The physical descriptions of paradise are thus metaphors for states of the soul: purity, harmony, light, and contentment. And when the soul reaches its final station, it will hear the divine words, "I am pleased with you," and in that moment, all longing will vanish. That is the true reality of paradise, the eternal presence of the Creator, the never-ending peace of being loved by Him, and the realization that every hardship, every prayer, and every act of faith led to that divine meeting.